This CES 2020 coverage is brought to you by Corsair and Elgato Gaming. Both companies actually have quite a few products announced at CES 2020. You can go check out my second episode of CES to learn more. They got some really cool stuff, especially for streamers. So we started this day, I can't keep track of which day it is, at CES at the Patriot Suite. And of course, you guys know I love my fast storage, so I was immediately attracted to the SSDs. And they have a PCIe 4.01, the 4100, that I didn't know already came out. That is super impressive, so I'm going to see what I can do with that. But they specifically have the VPR 100, which is using a new Phison controller, and it actually controls RGB through the bus. So it has a heat spreader with, a pretty cool RGB layout, but instead of running a separate, USB header cable or anything like that, it's all through the PCIe bus, which is really cool. They got software to control it, along with their RGB RAM, so you get some pretty cool options without all the extra wire weight and things like that. And then they also have some new USB-C and Thunderbolt SSDs, such as the PXD, which is just a basic USB-C SSD that can go up to 2 terabytes, but would be useful for trips like this. And then they have the Evolver 2, which is a Thunderbolt 3 SSD, which actually gets some pretty impressive speeds, up to 2850 megabytes per second read and 2600 write, and it can go up to 2 terabytes as well, which would be useful for certain situations, but also if you have a MacBook, you're pretty much guaranteed to have Thunderbolt. So that is really cool to see. And then they also have the upcoming P220 SATA SSD in up to 4 terabyte capacities, which could be useful for your bulk storage or just for loading up a good Steam game library like I like to do. What I didn't expect to see was their new gaming headset. I'm kind of done with gaming headsets at this point, and then they said it's super lightweight, so I was like, okay, and then I put it on and I was like, oh, it actually is. I'm not a big fan of the solid band headsets because they sit really heavy on my head. I barely noticed this was on, so we'll see. Hopefully I can get a review unit. We'll see how long-term use lasts, but it's got some nice RGB. It's got big, nice 53 millimeter drivers, braided USB cable, pretty nice little setup. So I didn't expect to be surprised by a gaming headset of all things. So this is what the microphone, it's completely detachable on the V380 headset sounds like. We are in a very crowded room, so hopefully we'll get a review unit sound a little bit better, but just to get you a little early extra sample. They've got the new Viper 4 blackout memory, so for those of you that don't like the rainbow unicorn vomit, you can just get totally sleek black design. Goes up to 4000 megahertz speed, pretty nice. And then they've also got the V551 gaming mouse, which is kind of like a hybrid between a FPS and MMO mouse. It's got quite a few buttons, but not like too many that you're just smashing them every time you use the mouse, and has a nice little ergonomic design with some RGB flare and things like that. So that was pretty cool to see. It goes up to like 12,000 DPI, but I'll be at like 400. But pretty cool stuff here at Patriot. My voice is already going out, so we'll see what all we get recorded today, but I'm excited to see what else we see. So we're here at the Gigabyte suite, and they have some pretty crazy custom modded PCs on display, and they've got a new Aorus AIO system in 360mm, 280, 240, and a lot of really pretty stuff. But I'm more attracted to the creator-oriented stuff. They've actually really been beefing up their Designator product line to really make it a content creator solution, which means really fast storage and some really cool stuff. They have the X299X, which is still compatible with X299. Extreme Water Force board, which has full water cooling on board because those chips get hot, as well as the Designator for X299 without water cooling, and I was going to say X499 myself, TRX40, and the boards.
They're boards.
Yeah, they're boards. They're kind of boarding. Anyway, they also have some really cool storage solutions in the works. So this is a brand new thing that they have never made before, and they're still kind of finalizing, which is a Designator SSD over USB Type-C. Now currently, this is just a 1 terabyte drive, and they have an as-media USB controller in there, the Phison, whatever it's called. Just a USB-C SSD, but it is USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2, 20 gigabit per second, which is really freaking fast, and they tell me they can actually beef this up to 8 terabytes, although the controller changes, and obviously pricing's gonna scale with that. But if you're traveling doing a show and you need a lot of storage on the go and you have a fast enough laptop, this is pretty sick. If you're looking for stuff internal, they've obviously had their add-in cards for NVMe RAID for a little while now, but this one is specifically built for Intel because I've been doing all of my rating on AMD, but on Intel you don't have, VROC never really happened. You don't have a whole lot of those options. So they actually put a RAID chip on this card. So you can load up 4 NVMe SSDs get pretty fast performance. It's still Gen 3 for this since it is for Intel, but you have the RAID chip on board that you can fully configure via software to set up the RAID that you desire and still have full compatibility on Intel, which is really freaking cool. And then I did get to test their Gen 4 RAID card and get some ridiculous bonkers speed. And then they also real quick have their designator RAM, which is just this nice sleek design. It kind of is meant to reflect the RGB LEDs that are already in your system. And these go up to 32 gigabyte DIMMs, so you can really load up on that RAM, which, as you guys know, I love. Really cool stuff here at the booth. They also real quick just have a budget water-cooled graphics card that aims to be under $1,000, which is a pretty big deal. And since it cuts out all the extra flare, perfect for someone like me who keeps a completely closed up, no window system. I don't need it to look nice, I just need it to work. So they got some cool stuff here, but I think we're gonna go on to something else. So following Gigabyte, we ended up stopping by EVGA's booth, and they honestly didn't have a whole lot of new stuff available to show, but they had a couple things worth talking about. Firstly, they have an RTX 2060 KO graphics card, which KO is not a name that they've used for quite a long time.
What?
Got ice pouring over here. But the KO line is not something they've used for a long time. They've been reviving some pretty old product lines recently. But it is the cheapest 2060 you can pretty much get your hands on. It is $299, which is pretty cool. Then they also, the only other real new thing they had, well, they had the SR3 Dark on show. That's not, we already knew about that and everything, but seeing it, in person as someone who's been trying to track down the SR2 is, pretty cool. Nice little setup if you're going for that Xeon platform, which is questionable how worth it is, but it's a cool motherboard for those who want to do it. That's fine. But they also have a new version of their new audio products. I did not get a chance to check out the first one, and I had many requests for it, but their new audio is their super high-end sound card for PCs. And no, sound cards are not dead. These provide, super high-quality DACs and multiple output interfaces. I believe the main stereo one has your 1/4 inch, I believe. If not, it's 3.5 millimeter. You got a mic input, so you have a much higher quality mic input than what's on your motherboard. When you're using something like the mod mic, there's a lot of issues. Like, I couldn't use it on my desktop because my motherboard's audio was so crappy, whereas my laptop was fine. So it has mic input, headphone output, be it 1/4 inch or 3.5, I don't remember off the top of my head. But then it has RCA and optical, so you can route to any audio system you have set up. That was Gen 1. They took a lot of feedback and they revised it a little bit with some pretty killer RGB on the side edge. Some weirdly color choice for EVGA, the green company, a big bright orange panel on the front. So if you're putting that like vertically mounted in your case, it's gonna look weird unless that's your theme. But honestly, like I had asked if other color options were available, they're not. But honestly, when it's slotted in on the side, you don't see that at all, so it's fine. I was kind of worried about it once I saw it. It's fine. And then they now have an option. So the new one is called the New Audio Pro. It comes with a 7.1 module now, which is kind of cool, but it is an entire second card. So you have all the stereo routing on the first card, and then you have a secondary PCIe card that takes up actual slots and lanes instead of just being like hovering in a physical, slot cover. And then you connect it, which is weird that then you still need the lanes because it's also connected to the first one via USB-C, kind of like the old school sound cards that I installed like in my Windows XP rig and things like that. That then gives you the extra outputs, they're super spaced out for a 7.1 surround system. It is a little pricey. The combo setup is $299, but you can also just buy it with just the stereo and then buy the surround sound later. So $299 for the combo, $229 for just the stereo. It is a bigger price point than most people are willing to pay, especially when you've had things like the Creative Sound Blasters, which are 99% of the way there unless you have super obscure headphones. I will say, they had a demo there with some Odyssey headphones. I don't remember we couldn't figure out the exact product model. It wasn't the LCD2s. These were closed back, but it provided a really good like kick back in a recliner, just close your eyes and listen to music experience. It did sound pretty good. I will want to hook it up and see if it is actually noticeably better than the shit stack or my basic Behringer headphone amp from my Go XLR, because there's some placebo effect going on. But pretty cool experience, and I'm super stoked to check it out because new audio products, not in you, but new audio products excite me very much. But that is literally all they had at the show. Oh, it also does play DSD audio files, which are like fairly obscure at the moment, but like super high resolution format stuff. But play your FLACs and your waves and foobar, and you're good to go. Second to last, we hit up ZOTAC. I actually just got done reviewing one of their mini PCs, the ZBox Magnus, which was great for creators and things like that. And I still have a couple of videos coming on that post CES, but they have a new one coming that I am super stoked on. And Jeff is probably going to have to tell me the name. It is the ZBox Inspire Studio. And they're shooting for RTX Studio certification. I've talked about this a lot at CES and prior to that, because I work with NVIDIA a lot on their studio products, is these are certified and optimized for creator workflows for studio environments. So it has, high-end RTX graphics card options. I think he mentioned there would be a Quadro option available as well. I don't remember any of the specs offhand because I didn't write any notes because I'm an idiot. Slick white design. But the cool thing here is, and I mentioned this with the laptops, with MSI, but like a lot of these studio products are focused on the high end. So NVIDIA had some pretty cool studio desktops that we didn't even talk about that had some sleek design that looked like an Xbox One or an HP all-in-one that were really cool, but those things are going to cost a boatload, whereas this is a really simple all-in-one solution for someone who wants to make 4K videos and doesn't want to build their own computer. They just want to, or either they need like an office full and they can't just put big towers everywhere. They want to install them in certain places, but can still get the job done because a lot of workflows don't need what I need for crazy things or don't need what an actual Hollywood professional needs. And so to see more of these products come up in, fellow content creators' workflows and not some editor working for a studio that would be buying Mac Pros anyways is really cool. And I am super stoked for this product. And they had, it showed up where you could check it out and things like that. So I'm pretty stoked for that. They did have a beefier processor in there. Was that the one with the i9 or was it the...
That was the 9700.
9700, okay.
9700
so
and
about
RTX 2060.
So about the same, fairly similar to the Magnus I checked out actually, but it was much bigger, much more cooling. You're going to stay a lot closer to those boost clocks than you did on the Magnus I reviewed. Pretty cool stuff there. The last stop we made for today was Asus's suite, or rather their floor. That was interesting. And they had a lot on display, and we didn't even cover a lot. But again, I'm focused on the creator-oriented stuff. They had an update to the monitor I returned to start my monitor roulette series last year, which is the PA32UC. It now has a G at the end of it. I didn't figure out what that was actually for. They have updated it to 1600 nits peak brightness, so HDR 1600. That thing got bright as can be, and they tweaked the full array local dimming zones and a couple little things about it. But even sitting there, the same reasons I returned it, the actual HDR footage, they had some gorgeous footage of downtown Las Vegas. But then when it showed up the Asus logo, the haloing was still massive, even with the local dimming zones updated. And it's still only a 32-inch form factor, which I physically cannot use in my workflow. And that's been kind of frustrating. They do say it's possible, like they're considering options for a 27-inch, but they're using this panel for a couple other monitors, so it's easier to, develop. And apparently people prefer 32-inch for 4K, but 27's always been the sweet spot for me. They did have another monitor coming with that same panel. It was only HDR 1400 nits. They weren't cranking it quite as hard, but it was a gaming display as well that looked absolutely gorgeous. And then they had a big, giant 43-inch monitor with a product number that he's getting all over, with a product number that I'm not going to remember. HDR 1200 though, similar to the LG one that I think it was Kyle or Paul that set up as their security monitor because you can map all the inputs and stuff. 43 inches, but it was HDR 1200, which looked really good, and it had a lot of cool gaming specs. I think it was 4K 144 hertz.
Yes.
It had their DSC signal processing because we don't have the bandwidth for that, which I'll talk about in a moment. And a lot of cool gaming features, and then they had right angle connections on the side like a TV, so that was really cool to see. Something that I could see myself using and more of a desktop console gaming setup, or push it real far back for gaming. But for my traditional setup, no way in hell. I used the 40-inch TV, and that was already too big for me at one point. The issue is none of the monitors they are launching has HDMI 2.1. And we talked about this on the Talking Heads live show I was on with Craft Computing and Steve and Jason from Bite My Bits. But there was some delay in the certification hardware and testing procedures for HDMI 2.1. And these products take years to develop and fully come to fruition. But it is really unfortunate, especially when LG is launching all of these TVs with this forward-looking HDMI 2.1, because that will have the bandwidth for real 4K 120 certification, 8K 60, and all that kind of stuff, 360 hertz even. And a lot of these monitors on the show floor and on these booths don't have it. And if I'm spending, that 43-inch monitor was $1,500, which for what it is not a big deal. I didn't even flinch at that because the Asus monitor, at least, or the ProArt monitor, at least the previous one that I bought, was $2,000. This newer one's probably going to launch at $2,000 or a little bit more expensive because I got it on sale. For a good monitor, like for the top tier monitors, that ain't nothing. Especially, you know, the Pro Display XDR or whatever, that's $5,000. But if I'm going to spend $1,500 on a big monitor like that, that's an investment for my setup for the future. And when it's already at those top tier specs and sacrificing chroma subsampling for those inputs and things like that, I want the forward-looking input technology to make it happen. They had a few other things. They do have a single slot Gen 4 PCIe RAID card. It doesn't have a RAID chip like Gigabytes, but you know, PCIe RAID card coming for the Gen 4 for Threadripper is the word I'm looking for, builds. Which I'm super stoked for because the MSI one in my Threadripper build at the moment is 2-slot. Has a giant fan, gets really loud, requires a 6-pin power connector. That's stupid. Like, they don't need that much cooling. The Asus one is single slot, no power, super slim, super sleek, and only costs $49.99. That is perfect. I am super stoked to get that picked up. I think they're going to send me one. If not, I will happily buy that day one on Amazon because, duh. And then they did have some of the laptops on display. And you can actually go check out Jeff from Craft's Computing video because he is super stoked on the Zephyr line, things like that. I was looking at some of the Creator laptops. They had a few different options, but even though it isn't studio certified and doesn't have the RTX 5000 graphics card that was in some of the models I have, I am still hyped on the ZenBook Duo. Linus Tech Tips made a couple videos with Taryn about it, but I felt like they really, like they did the I Just Seen versus Taryn video was freaking great. But I feel like there wasn't a ton. I watched it on Floatplane, so maybe they cut it out for like the ad spot that was just like removed from it. But I don't feel like enough time was spent really talking about how great that second display is for streaming workflows, for video editing workflows, for all the things you can do on it. And so I really hope I can get my hands on one at some point to kind of dive into that, because instead of bringing my giant gaming laptop that weighs way too much for me to carry around to CES, I want that laptop that's capable of editing and doing really cool stuff, and I can take it to the show floor to take notes with. So that was pretty much our second to last day here at CES. Again, nothing big wowing us, but a couple little releases. We're kind of at an awkward point where there is nothing to release. AMD, of course, talked about, I didn't talk about this in a video, the 64-core processor, 3990, which is releasing for $3,990. Some people are really excited for it, but I can't figure out who can actually take advantage of it yet. I'm actually going to sit down. I may even do a whole video with Wendell. Okay, what are you doing? I genuinely want to know, what will you do with it?
Games and stuff?
On 64 cores?
Sure.
See, that's what kills me. Is people are like, yeah, you keep talking about cores in Resolve. Just use it in Resolve.
You must play Candy Crush.
Candy Crush. But like, I thought I made it pretty clear in my Threadripper coverage that there was no point for me to use the 3970X. So there is going to be no point to use the 3960S. You know, you see no scalability and performance for anything that I can create. Obviously, there is tiers and tiers above me for that kind of thing, but especially when everything is still leveraging the GPU so hard, we're at this weird point. Wendell was talking about this in one of his videos. He's like, yeah, everything pushed to GPU, but now we can come back to CPU. But there isn't a whole lot of reason to do that. And I do think a 24-core, like I did a whole bunch of testing right before Threadripper came out with the Quadro RTX 6000 versus the Titan RTX versus my 2080 and my 1080 Ti. I wanted to figure out what I needed in my workflow to get the best. I was doing that on the 3900X and on my X299 7980XE. I got decent results. I figured out what I wanted in that case, but I genuinely saw an increase in the performance I could get out of my Titan, which is what I finalized with, on Threadripper due to the increased I/O, the bandwidth, all of the bottlenecks basically being removed. And so I genuinely believe for a video production workflow, a super high-end graphics card doing a lot of the work with CPU being left to do things like decoding your footage and making it so your graphics card isn't waiting on that. Little things like that is great. But I genuinely, outside of virtualization, at which point, why are you using Threadripper? I haven't really been able to fathom why. And so I really hope that we see some use cases, but I know those initial benchmarks are just going to be that.
Synthetic.
Purely just for EPing? Who's paying? Of course people pay $4,000 for EPing.
I'll jump in for a second here.
Guess spot.
Until software catches up with the amount of CPU horsepower that's available, the Threadripper 3990 is not going to be worth it for most workloads, including video rendering, including 3D animation, including CAD work, including all of the other workloads that you can possibly throw at me in the comments, or at him rather. Because we've been leveraging the GPU for synchronous compute for so long, that's where the software is at right now. And until we catch back up on the CPU side, there's a lot of cores that are going to be wasted right there because it's not optimized for that workload.
Well, and like the thing is, do we want that to happen? Like, people keep saying we're reaching the end of what we can pull out of silicon as like a basis for things. But we're also, I think we're reaching like kind of a stagnant point of how far we can go with that before we start looking at new ways to compute in the first place. And this can be a total breakout later on, but just real quick, like, why would we, when the GPU decodes all of this so much faster than CPU, why would we want to put that back on the CPU? There isn't, especially when it's just decode, encoding has its own issues, whatever, that's fine. But again, encoding's not using 60, unless you're doing like 48K, which doesn't exist as a format. You're not using a CPU for encoding.
You'd shoot in it.
Yeah. But like, when it's just things that is processed on the GPU and there's no, quality degradation kind of situation, it doesn't make sense to put that back on the CPU because we're at this point where we do one or the other. So always one of them is going to be left sitting, and there's no point. It's like, okay, I'm going to get a 64-core CPU and pair it with a 2060 because I don't need the GPU anymore. Like, no, we need to find more uses for the CPU and for the cores, and I don't think it's going to be like in catching up. And we're at this weird point where like half of the audience says, lol, Premiere doesn't use more than like 2 cores because it's not multi-threaded, when that's not true, but everyone keeps saying that for some reason. And then we're at a point where like people are like, yeah, more cores equals better, which also isn't the case because we're at a point where performance is so good, I don't think there is there's no catching up to make it better at the moment.
No. And even in the workflows that do make sense for more cores, it's all going to be rendering work. It's not going to be live workflow. And I've ran into this myself. I've been editing on an 8-core machine for as long as I can remember, for probably the last almost 3 years now. There's no scalability in the number of cores for live workflow. You get definitely increased rendering performance if it can take advantage of all the cores, but what I'm doing in the moment matters so much more than the end render time. Whether a video renders in 8 minutes or 12 minutes, it has no impact on my workflow.
But also there are so many factors to that where the CPU like normalizes in that use case too, because you go from a Gen 3 to a Gen 4 PCIe SSD, you cut your render times in half, your CPU's, as far as you can tell, it's the same utilization.
Right.
And so and this is what I talked about in my original Threadripper review, and I was hoping AMD would launch with WRX80, TRX80 that clearly is vaporware or never really existed. But I also would hope that they launched with use cases for it, and I don't think they are. I don't think they know what it's for. They're just like, we can do this, screw it. And that's what I was saying in my original Threadripper review is, I genuinely don't know where we go from here for the technology. Like, yeah, improve latencies, improve clock speeds, whatever, but in terms of like, this is a revolution almost that the 64 core just doesn't make sense because it like we're already past the point of like, I don't know. It's been a long week and I was hoping I'd get answers and I have not gotten any.
I don't have any for you.
Damn you. What good are you?
I have whiskey.
I might need it at this point. Thank you so much for watching all the CES coverage. We have a cool video coming soon for those of you purely focused on the streaming of a mobile streaming setup we did for the Talking Head show and his Zcam E2 setup. I finally got to touch the Zcam E2. We're recording on that right now. Yep. It is freaking phenomenal.
He likes it.
Yeah. Yeah. Go check it out. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Go check out all my other videos. I keep getting replies to my stories asking what I think about Elgato's HEVC stuff. It was literally like my main video. Go watch it. Duh. All right, see you next time.
Watch my stuff too.
It is 4:10 a.m. by the way, and I still have to edit this.
Yep. Let's get to it.